We're taking a look at the 98 Jeep TJ disassembled. So it's really good to label all the electrical connections that come off, especially your injector connections. If you get those screwed up, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So make sure you take the time to label those. To start off, really the big things, everything is pretty well simple and straightforward as far as taking things off, like your throttle body. The big issues is, of course, the fuel rail that I took off. I went for taking the clips off the injectors and pulling it out that way, and relieving the pressure via the valve. Now, you could go ahead and try to pull them out. I found it really difficult to pull them out, so I'm just going to pull the intake off and try to take them out one at a time after that. And make sure all your O-rings are accounted for. I still have one left in the fuel rail. The next big thing is your pulley. So you want to loosen the bottom, this bolt down here for the tension pulley, and this side one right over here. You can really get a long extension on it and pull that puppy out. Then you can rotate this to access those 3 bolts through that opening with the 13mm deep socket, and that will free it from the intake. And that's your first big step. Once you get to there, then you have to tackle the studs and the bolts. Those are the big ones. I mean, more is better, so the largest bar possible to get really good torque. You're gonna have less of a chance of snapping any of those bolts or nuts. And that's basically it for stage 1. As long as those nuts come clear, you're good. There's also a line at the bottom. I would definitely get a flex handle ratchet. It's a 10mm. There's 2 nuts behind there that you have to free. Use a 10mm flex handle ratchet, basically like that, underneath, and you can, that's about the only thing I could find to get under there. And so far so good. So that is basically stage 1. Make sure you spray those down. I use a lot of PB Blaster and the nut freeze off spray to really penetrate in there and get rid of all the rust, so you'll have a better chance of getting those bolts off without snapping them. Okay, so we're back in part 2, and the manifold came off without snapping any of the bolts or nuts. Just want to clean those off before reinstalling them. Or if you have new ones, use the new ones. Unfortunately, I bought this brand new manifold from ATP Automotive, and they forgot to send the new studs and bolts and nuts. But there it is. I didn't really notice any cracks on the manifold, so it was probably just the gasket. And there's the new gasket. I may wind up spraying that with the copper gasket spray, just to help seal up any kind of gaps. And the intake manifold was a bit of a pain in the butt to get off with those engine dowels. They need a lot of twisting and working to get out. And this is kind of the stage where you just want to clean everything up before reinstalling everything. I want everything spotless. And that includes the inside of the engine. Really needs to be cleaned up. Use a lot of carb cleaner and razor blades and scrape everything down, and then we're going to get ready for the reinstall. So everything came off pretty easy. I used a lot of PB Blaster to make sure everything came off. I think I sprayed about a full can of that on over a period of 4 or 5 days. So there we go. It's just cleanup time. A lot of paper towels and cleanup tools, and then you're ready to reinstall. Okay. Okay, so we got the exhaust manifold on and the intake manifold back on. Wound up hammering the engine dowels into the block and then placing the intake over the dowels after. Just going to be putting the pulleys on. As far as bolt pattern goes in, I pop this center bolt on first, place the exhaust manifold on, and then place the intake on. Without the hardware for this ATP exhaust manifold, that center nut and washer isn't straight because of that heat shield that's over that new manifold. The rest of them are okay. Then follow with those two studs. Just place them in lightly just so you can hold everything in place. And then that's your first bolt. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh as far as torquing. I haven't torqued them yet. I'm going to use a 3/8 torque wrench to torque everything down before I wind up sticking the fuel rail, throttle body, and everything else over top. You just want to make sure you have all your O-rings on your injectors before putting them back in, and hopefully you don't get any leaks. If I don't get any leaks, should be good. And we're looking at about 6 hours in. This is my first time doing this job, so it would obviously be less time if you have a good plan. You could probably do it in about 5 hours. 5 hours on an afternoon. The guy giving you a hand, no problem. Okay, we'll see how everything turns out. Okay, we're looking at the final part of this manifold installation. I reinstalled the belt, bolts, throttle body, which was the 4 bolts, made all the connections, the reconnections of the wires. I only lost one part on this job. It was this cover. Who knows where that went? Somewhere. It's gone. Oh well. Other than that, you can retorque the bolts after about 1000 K if you want on the manifold. They may loosen up a little bit. As far as the injectors are concerned, the way I took mine apart, I actually just removed the entire injector from the fuel rail. If you didn't do that, you may try to struggle to get it back in the intake, but with the gaskets, the little rubber O-rings on the injectors, you get them as tight as you can lined up, and then once you install those 2 bolts on the fuel rail, they really tighten it up and prevent any kind of leaks. I checked to make sure there was any fuel leaks, and there was none, so it worked out well. Everything went back together. It took me about 8 hours to take it off and put it back apart, and that was pretty slow. You know, I made sure I checked all the details, and I wasn't quite sure. It was kind of one step at a time, so I'm sure it would go a lot quicker if you just follow the instructions. So yeah, and it's night and day difference. Jeep is about 20 times quieter and runs a lot better, and you don't get those exhaust fumes going into the passenger compartment. So perfect.